Okay, solve each quadratic by completing the square. Just so you know, the quadratic method and completing the square method will always work when solving quadratics. Factoring doesn't always work. So here's the process to complete the square. The first thing that you want to recognize when you have a quadratic is that you want to get the p squared or the x squared and the bx by itself. You want to isolate those two terms. And so in this case, we would add 105 to both sides. We would just add 105 to both sides. That's how we'd get that, the first two terms by themselves. And then you're going to simplify that, and we're going to complete this square right here, make it a perfect square trinomial. And how you find that perfect value is you take half of the b value, divide it by 2, and you square it. So that's how you find that c value. So we're going to simplify this. We're going to add negative 9 to 105, and that's 96. Well, what is half of negative 4? It doesn't matter if you think about it as half of 4 or half of negative 4, because when you square it, it'll be a positive number anyway. So half of 4 is 2. 2 squared is 4. So you're going to end up adding 4 to both sides. So let's see what we did here. So yeah, we're going to take half of 4, which is 2, and then we're going to square it. So half of b, that's negative 2. Negative 2 squared is 4. Now, once you have completed and we have a perfect square trinomial, the whole reason we do that is we write it in the binomial squared. So you take the square root of the first term, you take the square root of the c term, and this operator is going to go between those two, and then you're going to take the square root of the other side. So we're going to take the square root of p squared is p, the square root of 4 is 2, and there's a subtract sign right there. So p subtract 2, that phrase, squared, is equal to 100. So now we're going to take the square root of both sides. When you take the square root, when we're dealing with quadratics, remember there's always a positive and negative version. So square root of 100 is both positive and negative root 10. And the square root of a binomial squared, those two things cancel, leaving p subtract 2. And now we're just going to add 2 to both sides. And when we do that, we get a negative answer and a positive answer. Well, depending on the situation, if that p was big enough and we were subtracting it, sometimes we'd get 2 negatives, or sometimes we'll get 2 positives. One will be smaller than the other. So we have 2 subtract 10 from right here, which is negative 8. And then we're going to have 2 plus 10 from right there, which is positive 12. All right, so let's look at this next one. So I'm going to cover all of this up. You guys can pause this if you need to. All right, so when the leading coefficient is not 1, you still want to get these two things, or one method is to get those two things by themselves. So we would add 100 to both sides. But before we can work on completing the square, we need this lead coefficient to be 1. In order for that to happen, we would divide each term by 6. And then we simplify. So 6a squared divided by 6 is 1a squared. Negative 12a divided by 6 gives us negative 2a. 90 divided by 6 gives us 15. And now we can complete the square. Half of 2 or half of -2 is 1 or -1. Well, when you square 1 or -1, you get +1. We're going to add that to both sides. Now we have a perfect square trinomial, the square root of a squared, the square root of 1, and that negative sign is what's going to go in the binomial squared. 15 plus 1 is 16, and then we're going to take the square root, that cancels, of both sides, and then we're going to have a positive -4, and a subtract 1. Well, then we're just going to add 1 to both sides. And when we do that, let me move this out of the way. 1 subtract 4 is -3. And 1 plus, I don't know why, 1 plus 4, oh, I was thinking of the result, is 5. Just like that. All right, that is it for completing the square.